Welcome in. It is Big Ten Today, the Monday Schmooze presented by Gatorade. Great to have you with us. Dave Revson, Nicole Auerbach, and Howard Griffith. We got the matchup we were hoping for. There wasn't a ton of on-the-field drama. There has been significant off-the-field drama. But in the end, 11-0 against 11-0.
This is all we've been hoping for all season long. We finally get it. There's actually a lot of unbeaten Power 5 teams still at this point in the year. We don't always see this.
Yeah, there really is. And to me, it really shows just how there's not that one great team necessarily. You know, fan bases are still involved and excited. And quite frankly, I mean, we've got the Michigan-Ohio State game. That's really the biggest game this week, so it's going to be fun to watch.
It is going to be huge. Again, one of the bigger games, I would say, in the history of this rivalry, and we've been able to say that 2 years in a row. Really outstanding. Let's get to our big story. It is the weekend that was in the Big Ten, highlighted by wins from Michigan and Ohio State. They're both 11-0 heading into the game, second straight season, as I mentioned. Elsewhere, Iowa rallied to top Illinois. They wrap up the West for the second time in 3 years. Wisconsin got an OT win over Nebraska. They extend the Big Ten's longest bowl streak to 22 years. And Northwestern going bowling after a summer of turmoil. Cats got win number 6, knocking off Purdue. We'll get to some of those other teams a little bit later in the show, but want to devote the early part of the show to Ohio State and Michigan. We'll talk about what they did this past weekend and then turn the page in a bit and focus in on the game. Let's start with Ohio State. At halftime, I think you could have made the argument that Minnesota was at least in the game theoretically. They were not in the game by the time we got a minute and a half into the second half. Ohio State really put the gas pedal down to the floor, and very impressive early in the second half.
This is where we talk about what's changed and where Ohio State has gotten better through the season. Those really quick, explosive plays where they can just change the game in a minute and a half. I mean, that has been really apparent. And I just thought it was such a great example of why we're so excited about where Ohio State is, especially offensively. I know that wasn't all offense there that led to that. But this type of explosion, the run and the pass game, they look good.
Well, I think you hit it right on the head when you brought in the run game, because you think about the explosion that they have at the wide receiver position. But this is an offensive line and a run game that people weren't really excited about early in the season. And it really took a while for them to really get to the point where they are right now. And it just shows you just what a difference maker Henderson truly is. Yeah. When he's playing the way he played as a freshman, when people were excited about him, and it's not always the offensive line. You still have to have backs that can make moves, that can take it the distance, and he's that guy.
Really encouraged by his performance here over the last few weeks. And then you add in Emeka Egbuka. To me, that was the big story. I understand Marvin Harrison got the touchdown, but was held reasonably in check. But now you've got to deal with Egbuka, too. And we were talking as we were watching the game in the green room about the fact that he looked better, and then Ryan Day commented on that as well after the game. It just feels like everything is peaking here for Ohio State. They said after the game they believe they're going to get Tommy Eichenberg back, and so you have as close as you can have to a complete team, and this is the team they expected to have all year, and it's really rounding into form.
Yeah. I mean, everyone always talks about peaking in November. You want to peak in this particular week if you're Ohio State.
Not early November.
Yeah, not early November, this week. And they've gotten healthier, and then those players, as they've become healthier, have been the difference makers that we know that they can be. And that wasn't always the case, especially when Travion is in and out of the lineup when he's been hurt. Like, he's healthy. And so that's what you want. I mean, they're not only playing their best ball and getting healthy, they're doing both those things as they head into Michigan when Michigan's not playing its best ball. So you've got to feel really good and really confident about the Buckeyes.
I think you have to be excited about the way McCord has developed the entire year. Because playing quarterback at Ohio State is different, particularly when you're having to step in for, 3 first-round picks that have played that position. And most people not consider you of the talent level. So he's gotten better. They've called the game to really be able to support him, and the game has really taken off and I think slowed down for him. He's really been able to utilize the tight end and Stover, which really, I think, helped him really expand his game, because before it was okay, everything in the middle of the field, I can hit him and make plays. And as the offensive line got better, as the run game got better, he was then able to go outside and do some creative things. And this is going to be a very interesting game because Michigan has shown some things defensively against Maryland that you say, oh, wait a minute. Maryland doesn't have the guys Ohio State has.
Well, and I want to mention, too, I mean, Ohio State's defense hasn't let up at all at any point in this, too, because when we got to this point last year, there had been some holes, right? We had seen some of those explosive plays coming against Maryland. Those haven't happened. So you have the anchor, right, the defense that has kept them in all these games while the offense has gotten better and better as Kyle McCord has gotten more comfortable. So now both sides are firing on all cylinders.
I agree with you. There were some holes. The holes really got exposed in the Michigan game and then subsequently in the Georgia game. So I don't want to say you reserve judgment, but this is where, and again, we have seen no signs. Like they have yet to give up a play longer than 50 yards all year, right? So we have seen no signs to lead us to believe that this defense isn't different. But this is the prove it game. I mean, this stretch, and if you win this game, then and get to the CFP, then the prove it game becomes the CFP game as well.
But this game is the one that set the narrative, right, about how they could get gashed. And it was 2 years ago against Michigan. And that's what they're fighting back against.
Absolutely. Okay, so let's turn the page and focus on the Wolverines, and then again we'll get into the breakdown. This was not an easy game against Maryland. I think it's fair to point out that we've looked at this Maryland team all year, Howard, and said if they put it together, they're pretty good. They haven't put it together all that much. Now, Michigan did, give them some credit. They scored on defense. They scored twice they scored twice on defense. They scored on special teams because they got a safety also. But offensively, I mean, it just felt like JJ was off the whole game. He threw a pick. He probably could have thrown a couple of more picks. What did you make of this performance from Michigan?
I would say this. I think that there has been immense pressure on this Michigan team the entire year. And I go back to my NFL days. When I was playing on a team that was undefeated, we spent a lot of time talking about how there's really no pressure. But, you're just, it's for the cameras. You're telling everybody, no, we're galvanizing, we don't have problems, but there's pressure each and every week. It continues to mount. So I thought they'd done an unbelievable job, particularly JJ has done an unbelievable job to this point. But there's always a point in the season when you're not going to play your best. It could be a quarter, it could be a game. Hopefully it's not more than a game. But now he has that opportunity to bounce back. You can talk about just how difficult and how Maryland was playing at a higher level than they've played in previous weeks because of who they were playing. They got up for their opponent. But I think JJ will be able to settle down. I think they'll have to really get things going offensively and be able to run the football, be able to play a clean game. One of the things that Ohio State did an unbelievable job of last week was keeping the quarterback in the pocket. It was hard to break contain. JJ is a quicker athlete, may be able to break contain, but he's got to stay within the game plan for them to be successful, I believe, this week.
Well, I think also as we look at what JJ wasn't able to do that we've seen him do, Roman Wilson's injury, you have to start by looking at that and hoping that he would be available for the Ohio State game because he's been his favorite target. He's been his number one receiver, and that's something he didn't necessarily have last year. They use their tight ends. They have other targets, but that's been his favorite one. And so that, I think, was noticeable as well once he got out of the game.
Were you suggesting, by the way, that players don't always tell the exact truth to the media?
Absolutely. We lie all the time. But here's part of it.
I had no idea.
We're lying to ourselves.
To try to convince yourself.
To convince us that, it's no big deal.
So here's what's interesting to me. You make a great point, right? Which is that sometimes you don't play your best. I think my question is, did they not play their best because it just happened randomly to be the week that they weren't going to play their best for whatever reason? Or did they not play their best because at a certain point, everything that's going on around you just adds up?
It's part of it. It's part of it. And I think you're not necessarily telling the truth when you're having to deal with all these things that are going on because it's pressure. I mean, there's a part that you need to handle and deal with as you're going through your preparation that all of a sudden, I got to talk about my head coach. I got to tell you how much I love my head coach. I got to tell you how much we're going to fight for him and do all the things and that takes time. That takes time out of your day. That takes time out of your preparation regardless of whether you're on the field or not. You could be at home. You're still addressing some of these things, whether it's on Twitter with your friends or family members, whatever it is, you're having to deal with that. But I say this, you can wipe the board now. This is about the game. And now I think you'll get the best version of this Michigan team offensively that we can possibly get, because what we haven't seen is necessarily dominant. We saw the dominant run versus Penn State, but the pass game.
Yeah. But also even the dominant run game wasn't really there against Maryland, and I still think that that's something that they would need. Yeah. I'm curious. So we've been waiting to see like Sharon Moore in a position where he needed to like make a decision, make a call. They didn't really have that against Penn State, right? Like they just ran the ball a million times. They were comfortable with that. That's all they needed to do. There were a fourth down decision. There were a couple moments late because it was a closer game. Did we learn something about him as a head coach?
I think what we've learned or what we've seen is that he's steady and he's going to be consistent. And he has the respect of not just the team itself, but also the coaching staff. Sometimes when you have an interim coach for this many games, there can be some infighting. I don't believe you see that with this staff. They have a great deal of respect for him. But you're right. And Coach says this all the time. It's never a problem until it's a problem, that decision.
Right.
So we don't know how it's going to. You can go through as many scenarios as possible because I'm sure they're going to do that. But until it's that split moment that you have to make that decision, you don't know.
That's stuff I want to talk about. So let's turn the page here next and let's get into the game. Get into the battle coming up here next weekend between the Buckeyes and Wolverines. Our big stat is brought to you by Gatorade. Win 11-0 Ohio State and 11-0 Michigan square off Saturday in Ann Arbor. It will mark just the fourth time this century that college football will have a matchup of two teams that are both 11-0 or better. Three of them have been OSU-Michigan games this year, last year, and then that famed 1-2 game in 2006. The other one, the SEC title game, 2009, Florida and Alabama. Let's dive into this one a little bit. We kind of started so tempting, right? We want to go down the road, so let's just go down the road. I think it's important to note Michigan's considered the favorite in this game. It's the first time in 5 years that Ohio State will be an underdog against a Big Ten team. So that's something to keep an eye on. I think my first question, and Howard, you started in on it a little bit. How much does the absence of Jim Harbaugh matter here?
I think it will matter if there are situations in the game that you rely upon a decision to be made, right? And it's not a knock against anyone else, but it's a reason that he's the head coach of Michigan.
You don't pay $10 million a year or whatever it is, right? Just to make a guy feel good. Like there's value in what he does.
Absolutely.
Yes.
And regardless of how you feel about him as a coach, it's the reason that he's the coach. And this team plays extremely hard for him, and he has his finger on the pulse of what buttons to push with this team. So I think it will be significant, but I think that Michigan can overcome it because of the staff that they have. I think this is an outstanding coaching staff, teachers, and also motivators that should be able to get this team ready to go. But there could still be a time in this game where there's a big decision that needs to be made.
Well, he's been thrown into the biggest games that they've had all season and had to manage them. And, we talked a lot about the play calling against Penn State and all the runs, and the run game was working. That was what they needed to do to win that game. But I think, you're right. If we're going to see him in situations he hasn't been in the highest pressure moments that he's ever been in as a coach. Like, that's just an entirely different scenario. And this is why, if you think about why the Big Ten structured the suspension the way that they did, it was to let the players have Jim Harbaugh at practice and have all of that insight throughout the week. But then if there is an advantage of having him on the sideline on Saturdays, you take away that competitive advantage. So that's where those moments could decide the game, and you don't have someone who's been there a lot. But again, you do have Sharon Moore coming off of 2 weeks of being in this position. Now knowing they had that whole week last week, knowing that he was going to be the guy, another full week knowing he's going to be the guy. So he'll be as ready as anyone could possibly be to be a head coach in this game, 2 undefeateds.
And I would say this, you're talking about a guy that's going to be roaming the sidelines.
He's going to be a head coach, no doubt.
Not at a little school, but a big school, right?
He's ready.
Because, he has the X and O and the it factor that allow him to do that. So the way they prepare, he's going to rely heavily. He has to rely heavily on his defensive staff to make sure you guys take care of what you've been doing. It's going to be him against Coach Knowles. And they've got to figure it out to be able to make sure JJ is in the right plays that he needs to be in. And part of that is having JJ be a part of the run game.
So to me, the kind of corollary to all this is how much does this put additional pressure on Ryan Day? Like, I'm not convinced there could be more pressure on Ryan Day to win this game. I mean, just understanding the dynamic of each one of these schools, right? I mean, this job comes with pressure, and I think these guys accept it and embrace it. But if you lose for a third straight time to Michigan and you lose to someone other than Jim Harbaugh on the sideline, does that amplify some of the frustration?
I think so. I think for sure. The only way to add more pressure here is to get Lou Holtz to say something else about Ryan Day, right? We know how he felt about that. But yes, I mean, you're already coming off these 2 straight losses, and they have this amazing record. You beat everybody else, but this is the one thing that you can't do. And then, I think even if you win, people say, well, Jim wasn't even there.
Oh, I don't think so. I disagree with that. No,
okay.
I disagree with that.
Because I think you're also guarding against that, too, because,
certainly no Ohio State fan would say that.
Okay,
I mean, maybe a Michigan fan would.
I wonder about that part a little bit, about if there's just like not a full asterisk, but a little, but
yeah.
I think though, if you lose, you're right. It's someone who has not been experienced as a head coach, gets thrown into this late. Michigan's not quite at full strength. I do think that would up the pressure, if even possible, right? Yeah. Losing 3 games in a row would already be doing that.
I think what we've watched Ryan Day do is probably his best coaching job to date since he's had the corner office, because it's been remarkable. The changes that he's had to make offensively. He's the play caller. He turned those duties over. And when things weren't going as smoothly as he needed to be, he was quickly able to step in and make the decisions. You look at the development of each of the things that they've done offensively. You look defensively. It's been outstanding. And I continue to go back to their playoff game is when I think things started to switch for him in the way he was coaching his team, because he had to get a team that was out of it. So season's over, right?
Yeah.
And they bounced back and were ready to go. So I think it goes back to that game, although it's a different team, just the way he's gotten this team prepared to this point. And again, he has an outstanding coaching staff as well that have been able to deliver and get those players ready.
He has addressed all of their shortcomings, right? So you talk about the defense and how he's actually hired the right people, and they've built that up. And then this season, you address, hey, I don't know if Kyle McCord can go win you a game. You learn something about him at Notre Dame, and he just gets better and more confident as the season goes on. And now they have those explosive pieces in the offense. So really, I'm with you. I mean, he's done an incredible coaching job this year, because every area that was a little bit of a weakness, and we nitpick because it's Ohio State, so we nitpick them. They all got addressed as the season went on. And so, he is obviously feeling the pressure. Everyone does. He was already talking about Michigan at the end of the game against Minnesota for a reason, because this is where all the marbles are. But he's done such a remarkable job of addressing every little piece that they needed to fix all season long. So you've got to think they're going to be in a really good position. And like we said, they were playing so well. This is the best they have been playing all season right now.
Yeah, I just keep coming. I agree 100%. Like, they could not feel better about where they are right now. I would have to think. Certainly, to your point, as you kind of go down the list of offensive line, is that group going to be good enough? It feels like that group's come together now. TreVeyon Henderson, right? Maybe the issue wasn't as much the offensive line as it was to a certain extent not having a game breaker behind them. But yeah, I mean, the quarterback, and then obviously the defense and the huge plays a year ago. What about from Michigan's point of view? I mean, it doesn't feel like they're playing their best football right now, and yet I would say dismiss them at your own peril. Yeah. Like, they have proven to us so many times here over the last couple of years, first of all, just how good they are. Like, they're really good. And then how resilient they are. And that if you do doubt them at any point along the way, they make you regret it.
They still have the confidence of what they've done in this game for the past 2 years and the way they've done it in the past 2 years. It wasn't necessarily these explosive plays over the top. It was, we're going to hit you in the mouth.
Yeah.
And we're going to find out. And that was the strategy going in against Penn State. We want to see just how physical you can be at the point of attack. There's going to be a lot of confidence from this Michigan team about the way they're going to go out and handle their business in this game. Ohio State's going to make some stops, right? But can you counter? Can you get back? And I was just thinking about this when we were talking. You asked a question a little bit earlier about not having Jim Harbaugh on the sideline. And sometimes you think about X factors. It may be that third wide receiver. It may be the second tight end. It may be a lot of different things, the nickel back. When you think about Michigan, Jim Harbaugh is the X factor. Whether it's the slapping of the shoulder pads before the game, whether it's looking the player in their eyes at a timeout saying that you got to get it done for us, he's that guy, right? He's that guy for Michigan. So who will be that guy now will be important.
Yeah, and I think, too, for Michigan, I think about, like, the way that we thought about them coming into last year's game off the Illinois game. They weren't playing all that well. They had actually been challenged for the first time 2 years ago. Was this going to be the team that could do it? Can they win a game on Cade McNamara's arm last year? Right. Could they win it in JJ's arm this year? Like, it's still similar questions. Mm-hmm. Like, right. we come into these games with the same types of questions, and they answer them. And I think, you know, with this defense, we've seen a very active defense. Mike Sanderson has been phenomenal all season, right? And then the front, you know, red zone issues have been a concern at times for Ohio State. So what if Michigan gets those stops and holds to field goals? Like, it's such an interesting game. And so I think even if Michigan isn't playing as well as we've seen them play this season, it's still the same DNA that we've seen them coming into this game and win it the last 2 years.
Great point on the red zone. Ohio State just isn't converting those into touchdowns at a rate that perhaps you should for a team of that caliber. You were talking earlier about Roman Wilson. Sharon Moore did address that in the news conference. The Michigan news conference has been going on while we've been on the air, and he said Roman Wilson should be good to go in this game. So
that's
you think
big.
about, no doubt. You think about kind of having your best players ready. And again, I'm not suggesting that that's not the case.
Yeah.
I'm just suggesting, I don't know, you never quite know how forthcoming people are going to be. But taking it at face value, that is huge news for Michigan because he is a difference maker.
And a player of his caliber, it's hard to keep him out of this game, right? It's going to be hard to keep anybody. We're talking about Eichenberg. It would be impossible to keep him out of this game, right?
You want to play against Minnesota.
They want to play. So I think we're going to get both teams' best effort. Hopefully everyone's able to play so that the fans and the viewers can get the game that they want.
You know who else wasn't there last year? Blake Corum.
Yeah.
Wasn't able to play.
Donovan Edwards was pretty good, though. So.
He was pretty good, but Blake is available. He wants to be. He comes back for this type of game, right?
He's back for this game.
Yeah. So I mean, there's so much going into this, and you do want all the best players on the field, and then hopefully they will be.
We'll talk as the week goes on again, kind of what the formula is for each side, but just quick. I just want to ask you guys, do you expect this to be, we're talking about the two best scoring defenses in the country. Michigan is first, Ohio State is second. They both have dynamic offenses. Mm-hmm. Do you believe, though, Howard, that defense ends up kind of ruling the day?
I think the defenses aren't going to give up the big plays. So offensively, you're going to have to put together 8, 9, 10-play drives. And inside of those plays, mistakes can happen. And both of these defenses can take advantage of that.
Yeah, I think maybe we have a game in the 20s. I do think, again, that's why I brought up the red zone issue for Ohio State. I do think you're going to need touchdowns in this game. But, there's just so much talent on the offensive side of the ball for both of these teams. They will figure out ways to get in the end zone.
It is going to be unbelievable. Cannot wait. Although I would say I don't want to wish Thursday and Friday away because those are always fun days. Right?
Good meals.
Those are good days. Yeah, those are good days on the calendar. But man, I'm excited for Saturday. The Iowa Hawkeyes will play for a Big Ten title 12 days from now in Indy. Rallied to take down Illinois 15-13 in Iowa City. D led the way as usual. They allowed just one Illini touchdown. The offense did just enough. Caleb Johnson scoring there. The go-ahead TD in the final minutes gave the Hawks the win and their second West title in the last 3 seasons. And to say they have overcome a lot in getting there would be an understatement. You think about Noah Shannon and the suspension in the preseason. You think about all of the injuries, including to Cade McNamara and 2 All-American caliber tight ends. You think about even in the last week, losing Cooper DeJean, everything swirling around Brian Ferentz. Pretty remarkable story.
It is, and they just continue to win games the way that they've won the games. I mean, there was the outlier, 22 points. That was an explosion.
That was crazy.
Ago.
Yeah.
It was crazy.
They got a wild hair. Yeah, they
but
just
this
felt
was
nuts.
the way
Yeah.
that they've won games. I mean, no one else wins games with 15 points like they do 3 times this season. And they need like one play. That's enough. The defense can stop the rest. It can hold them the rest of the way. Great special teams as always as well. And they just outplay all of these other teams in the West that kind of play the same way they do, but they do it better. And you saw how emotional Kirk and Brian were after that game to get this final Big Ten West crown, to get back to Indy 2 times in 3 years. It is remarkable with the way that they do it to make up for the offensive shortcomings.
It really is, and we talk about this every Monday, right? It's like, how do they do it? Right? How you lose Cooper DeJean, who's a first-round talent, and he's going to have an unbelievable pro career, I believe, and you still find other guys to step in. And it's the players, but it's also the system. It's also the belief in Kirk parents from the front of the room saying, hey, guys, just settle down. We'll be okay. And then while everyone else is asking the questions, you can't play offense this way, you can't do this, they just stay the course. And you talked about all the injuries. I mean, what an amazing coaching job that's been done there to win this way in this day and age of college football, still able to pull things off.
Right. I mean, it's been incredible. And even like Deacon Hill has gotten better the more we've seen him play, right? And like they have figured out ways to get the ball to playmakers after so many of them have gotten injured. I also just thought it was fitting that like ultimately the difference in this game was a safety, because that also underscores just how much the defense puts them in position to succeed, but also gives them
And the
points.
special teams.
And special teams.
Yes.
But they get them points too. And that also helps them. It really is like an extreme example of complementary football.
It is. No, it's complementary football to a T. I mean, this is exactly what you mean when you use that term, as you said. And I have to say, I really felt good for Brian Ferentz at the end.
Yeah.
The players chose to give him a Gatorade bath. It's clear that they have a real affinity for him. And you can say whatever you want to say about the offense. And look, the offense has not been great. Again, we've outlined some of the reasons why it hasn't been great this year. It hasn't been great in past years either. But you know what? I mean, the guy is now, Kirk Ferentz is now third all time on the Big Ten wins list. He passed Bo Schembechler, for goodness sake, on Saturdays, behind only Woody Hayes and Amos Alonzo Stagg, who did it over 100 years ago. So for all intents and purposes, he's second, right? I mean, say what you want, but he knows what he's doing.
He does, and I think you also got to give credit for Brian for coaching out the rest of the season, for figuring out ways to make this work with different players after injuries. I mean, they were trying. Cooper DeJean was even playing some offensive snaps before he got hurt too. So they all deserve a lot of credit for handling a very challenging situation. But also, like, this is a team now that I think could be a problem for whoever they play in Indy. I mean, this defense is elite.
It's going to be a close game.
They're going to go up against another elite defense, right? Like, I mean, it could certainly be a game that I was actually a little bit comfortable in.
I just go back to you just watch college football offensively right now, and just the way the ball is flying all over the field. And you watch Iowa, and it's like, how? And it just defies imagination that they can go out and play this way. But again, that's where I go back. You think about the players, and you mentioned it, giving Brian Ferentz a Gatorade bath, right? I mean, the connection. We talked about Michigan being galvanized, right? This Iowa team clearly has been galvanized by all the things that go on and what people are saying about them, their teammates, and they rally and they play. The system's unbelievable. I don't know how Coach Parker, I don't know how he does it, because he's a different dude. He is as fascinating a person to talk to.
Yeah.
But
and think what they lost from last year. I mean, you're talking about 2 first-round picks.
They just continue to do it.
Incredible achievement to win this division this year.
You talk about a galvanized team. How about Northwestern? The Wildcats, we know what they have overcome this year. Just a crazy summer that saw Pat Fitzgerald dismissed, and frankly dismissed for things that went on among the players, right? I mean, I think that's part of where it really is a little different than some other stories. Yeah. And David Braun comes in, and a guy who's never coached at the FBS level. He is an FCS coach. He's brought in to fix a defense that had fallen apart in the previous 2 years. He gets thrust into this role as the head coach, and lo and behold, they're going to a bowl game. It is, again, I use the term remarkable story. I think with Iowa, this is too.
No one saw this coming. I think, coming into the season, if we had guessed win totals, we probably like the 2 range.
And I would have said that, honestly, had Pat Fitzgerald been the coach.
Yeah, because they were coming off of a one-win season, and you're bringing back a lot of those players, and there's just so much that needed to be fixed. And then you throw in the turmoil right on the eve of the season, and it's so easy if you're a player to just kind of throw the towel in and maybe try to go redshirt and go in the portal, whatever it is. And none of them did that. They played so hard for David Braun. We know that they are advocating for him to get that interim tag removed, which it was. So you just had an incredible week, I think, for this football program of him becoming the full-time head coach. They win this bowl game, last game at Ryan Field. There's so much joy and celebration on the field after the game. But it's one of the most unlikely stories that I could think of for this season. This is one of the biggest surprises nationally.
For me, I go back to when I saw him this summer.
You were unimpressed, as I recall.
Not even that close. There's no way you would have told me, because it was probably one of the worst practices that I had seen. But it was just coming off recent news. And again, we see a team for a couple of hours. And it was bad. It was just a bad practice. And to be able to bounce back and still believing with what's coming out of the mouth of the person in front of the room, they rallied. And you can have bad practices. Those things happen. But the way this team has come together, the way they've played defensively in this game, you think about those, the goal line stance. I mean, just unbelievable plays that they continue to make, and just made enough plays offensively to make things work.
And their defensive line, they were a sieve last year. Now they gave up more than 300 rushing yards in this game. A lot of it was a lot of quarterback run. And I'm not saying they played a perfect game by any stretch on defense. But their defensive line, they're playing holes with walk-ons. I mean, they are so much better on defense than they were a year ago. With worse personnel, I think it's fair to point out, or at least worse personnel on paper. There's fair to point out, they had 4 draft picks last year off a one-win team, including a first-round pick at left tackle. They lost Malik Washington, their best wide receiver, who, oh, by the way, was named a Biletnikoff semifinalist today at Virginia. I mean, the roster was completely depleted.
Yeah, they found some good pickups in the portal, for sure.
Yes.
But yeah, it's also just been guys playing well. I mean, even when Ben Bryant was down, right, they're able to figure out ways to win. So they've dealt with injuries and all of that. It's been a lot of different people stepping up.
And obviously a lot of credit has to go to the players. But when you mention guys getting opportunities, because that's what we've seen happen when people are leaving, when you have injuries, different things, guys wanted to play. And there are probably guys that didn't think they were going to play as much, as contribute as much, have gotten in there and done unbelievable things for this team this year. And to be able to have, that ability, and that, as one of my coaches used to call, want to, they wanted to go out and play. And to think that this team is bowl eligible, I think it was absolutely the right move for him to remove the interim tag. I think moving forward, it gives him an opportunity to start to build this team.
The bowl practices.
Yes.
Build huge. The bowl practices are huge for them, right?
They're huge. Not only that, I mean, you get an opportunity to have people come watch your practices too, recruits. So this is all significant.
Well, and the portal is about to open. The timing is really important as well to make that decision ahead of the portal opening and ahead of December recruiting.
And I said this on the final drive, I'll reiterate it here. The fact that Northwestern made a bowl game isn't that big a deal, right? I mean, they had made 10 in 13 years at one point under Fitz. They didn't make them the last couple of years. So they made a bowl game pretty much every year. But for this team to make a bowl game, that's a huge deal.
And also just off the last couple seasons.
Yeah, the last couple of seasons were right. It would have been a big deal had they made a bowl this year had nothing else happened.
Yeah.
Right? Because, wow, they bounced back and it seemed like the program was headed south.
And I think you could make an argument that they may not have made a bowl game this year when you look at the roster.
Yeah, we'll never know.
We'll never know.
We'll never
know now they're going bowling.
They are going bowling.
Congratulations.
Time to go around the Big Ten. Northwestern's quest for a second field hockey national championship in 3 years fell just short as the Cats lost to North Carolina in the 6th round of a shootout in the national championship game yesterday in Chapel Hill. It was the second straight year NU fell to UNC in the title game after the Cats won it all in 2021. The top-ranked Nebraska Cornhuskers, the outright 2023 Big Ten volleyball champs. Nebraska clinched the conference title Sunday with a 3-0 sweep of Iowa. The Huskers 27-0 overall. They're 18-0 in Big Ten play. Nebraska's women's soccer team is on to the Elite Eight of the NCAA tournament for the first time since 1999 after crushing UC Irvine 4-0 yesterday. The nation's leading goal scorer, Eleanor Dale, found the back of the net twice for the Huskers. Nebraska takes on Stanford Friday for a chance to play in the College Cup. And they are joined in the Elite Eight by Penn State. The Nittany Lions beat St. Louis 4-3 in overtime yesterday to earn their 14th all-time trip to the national quarterfinals. They will take on Clemson next Saturday for a spot in the College Cup. Time to go big picture, although next year this will be part of Around the Big Ten. We're going to focus in on Washington and Oregon. Both got wins on Saturday. Washington did it in absolutely miserable conditions.
That was Big Ten weather.
In Corvallis, they are ready for Big Ten weather. If you can win like they did in Corvallis. Oregon played in much nicer conditions in Tempe and absolutely blew Arizona State off the field. As you think about the CFP rankings coming out tomorrow, how do you view Washington and Oregon?
Well, I'm anticipating the committee will course correct a little bit here on the Huskies. It was so weird. Last week, they finally say, okay, Georgia has enough quality wins, we're going to bump them up to number one. But then they did not do the same for Washington, who has all of these quality wins, and now a win over Arizona, that looks better. But they should get the credit. This was a team that was number 11 in the playoff committee's own rankings last week. Plus, they've got the win over number 6. So these are two of the best wins anybody has. So I do expect that they'll go into the top 4 this week. If they went out and they're undefeated, they're going to be in the college football playoff. I personally hope we get a rematch of these two teams in the Pac-12 championship game. But Oregon is red hot. They play so fast. They put these games away in like an instant. They're just so explosive. So I've really enjoyed watching both of these teams since they played each other kind of go in different directions. Washington's made it hard on itself a little bit sometimes. They have.
They've struggled in some games, but they were able to pull them off. They've got a dynamic quarterback and a receiver core that makes all the plays. But I've just really been impressed with the Oregon team and the way they play. To me, when you look at them from a physicality standpoint, they're going to fit right in. This is a team that wants to be physical, wants to own the line of scrimmage, and then you couple that with having a dynamic quarterback and those receivers. Again, they can score so quickly, can make so many plays also in the run game. It's going to be fascinating to see just that style of play here in the Big Ten. Now, we have it. Ohio State, when they're rolling, plays similar. But it's going to be fun to see a team that's going to be physical with the line of scrimmage join us.
Oregon is just crushing people. So Michigan all year has been leading the nation in points differential. It is now Oregon. Oregon moved past them this week. And Bo Nix had 6 touchdowns and 5 incompletions in the first half. It's just absurd. And they do have a really good defense. Obviously, Dan Lanning's background is defense, which I think is part of what makes Oregon so interesting. Are you concerned at all about Washington and the fact that they have played a lot of close games? Like, they have not won a game by more than 10 points since September. They do not have a defense that is at the level of Oregon's. Not a lot of teams do. Does that concern you? Like when you, no doubt their resume stacks up with anyone. But when you try to look forward into, let's say they do make the playoff, is that the concern for you?
Yes. I do. I also wonder, again, if they play Oregon again, these two teams were so close the first time. It was a couple of those 4th down decisions that ultimately decided the game. But I do feel better about Oregon's defense. I think Washington's defense doesn't quite feel CFP caliber. But again, it doesn't mean that they can't get there. They keep winning these games no matter how ugly they are. An undefeated Pac-12 champion with this schedule this year with the way the depth in that conference, of course they're going to be in, but it does concern me. There's also been some offensive, concerns or lapses as well. Like the weather this week, that was a factor. You still had a Michael Penix throw to ice the game away. That was still remarkable. He did the little the bow and arrow thing. That was still a Heisman moment, but his stat line did not look good. He's had some of those games, Arizona State, where he didn't play well. But they've done enough to win the games, which still tells you something. So on paper, the resume is there. I think eye test probably not there compared to some of the other top teams.
I think you talk about a one-loss team. Everyone's gonna you talk about Oregon and what they're able to do.
Yeah, probably the best one-loss
out
team.
there. But I'd say this, and this happens it sort of happens every year where defensively you need that defense to get you to the game, to get you to the 14 playoff, and then you better have an explosive offense that can score. Once you get to that point.
Both of these teams certainly have that. And the wide
man.
receiver collection at Washington is unbelievable, and Penix, as we know, is a Heisman candidate, and so is Bo Nix. I want to switch to that conversation. So, I mean, now, like, the rubber hits the road here. Right, you got 2 weeks left to make a Heisman discussion. It feels like you maybe have 4 still in the conversation. I would say probably Jaden Daniels still in that conversation.
And Marvin Harrison Jr.
And Harrison, right. Harrison from Ohio State is, and then the other 2 would be the 2 quarterbacks at Washington and Oregon. So how do you think these stack up? We all have a Heisman vote. We're not going to say who we're going to vote for.
We're not allowed.
We're not allowed to do that. And plus, I think we all wait until, hey, I want to see all the evidence out there. But how do you think it stacks up?
Well, it does feel more wide open than a lot of other years. Like, there's a lot of years where with 2 weeks to go, we know who it's going to be.
Yes.
It does not feel that way. And I do think that the quarterbacks involved in the race this year have all been spectacular. Like, they've all put up crazy numbers. Jaden Daniels, with what he does on the ground, remarkable. So I think people could say that he's the most outstanding player in the country. And it doesn't matter that he's not going to play in the playoff. There have been quarterbacks, Lamar Jackson, Johnny Manziel, that have won the Heisman. RG3 with losses, not sniffing the national championship game. Issue for him is he's going to be a little bit out of sight, out of mind that last weekend by not playing in a conference championship game. So I don't know where I'm going to vote yet. And like we've talked about this all season with Marvin Harrison Jr., it's hard for a receiver to actually get to New York, but actually to win it. But all eyes are going to be on that game. So he has the biggest stage left.
Right. You talk about having a stage and the opportunity. And they're going to need him to play big as a Heisman Trophy candidate. They've got to find ways, and they will be creative, to move him around this week. They didn't do it as much last week and the week before. I expect him to be everywhere in that formation coming up.
Right. I think for him to win it has to be because, as you guys point out, there's going to be more people watching this game than any regular season game in college football this year by a wide margin. And so the way for him to win it is not going to be statistics. It's going to be people to watch this game on Saturday and say, man, this guy's the best player in the country. Now, Oregon's got a big game Friday night. They get Oregon State. That will be a big stage. A lot of people will be watching. And that's a good defense, but it just isn't the same.
And so that's again, huge opportunity. And then if those 2 quarterbacks face off in a Pac-12 championship, huge opportunity. And Jaden Daniels is doing all he can, but he's going to be a little bit limited by not playing that last weekend.
Right. I think he ends up winning it if no one else has like one of those wow moments here in the next couple weeks. Then people will look at just, well, who had the best numbers. And you look at his highlights or watch his games, and he's crazy.
Yeah, the rush numbers
are
are
no, it's insane.
Absolutely insane.